Damian is kind of a nice postmodernist reaction to not just Robin, but the Batman world.
Why would he allow a kid to go into battle like this? And for me, the only answer to that was because the kid is trained to such a degree he's almost as good as Batman himself.
He's been raised by killers to basically take over the world.
Damian was literally Batman's son.
That was fun.
The story of Batman getting together with Talia al Ghul actually happened in the mid-'80s. And then nothing was really done with it in the comics until Grant came up with the idea of revealing the son to Batman and having him be a character who was in conflict with Batman.
There were a lot of stories in the 50s, especially in the 60s, where Robin is really frightened because a new Batman has come along, a young guy who can replace him. And I thought, I kind of want to do something like that. Rather than son of Batman, I wanted Batman and son because it feels kind of like a family firm, and it's got a slight hint of the ridiculous about it. Once I realised that, the obvious place to go was Mike Barr's Son of the Demon book, because in that book, Batman and Talia had conceived a child.
You expect me to believe this?
I assure you, he's yours.
The first challenge for Batman was that he's got a son. You know, it's quite a shock for him. The son's grown up, and the son has now been dumped on his doorstep, more or less.
Don't look so stunned, Father. I thought you'd be taller.
He's this pretty feral child. He's been raised by killers to basically take over the world. His grandfather is Ra's al Ghul, one of the worst supervillains in the world.
And one of the first things that I was then able to do was play on the existing Batman and Robin relationship with the Tim Drake version of Robin.
It looks rather effeminate, don't you think?
When Damian sees Tim Drake, he wants to become Robin, he wants that role, and the way he's been raised, he immediately goes to, oh, so I kill him and accept his responsibilities. That's just automatically how the world works in his mind, because that's how he's been raised. And this is so antithetical to Batman, who not only doesn't believe in killing rivals, he doesn't believe in killing. Yeah, Damian, originally he tries to kill Robin. He doesn't try to kill his father and take his father's place. And partly there is a deferential nature to Bruce of, I'm not trying to kill you and take your place immediately. I'm frankly not that good yet, or that's not my role. But I'm supposed to be your sidekick. You're supposed to train me to become someone who in the future will be Batman. And then when Bruce is seemingly killed and Damian's left with Dick Grayson, it changes where he's still not really arguing that he wants the role over Grayson, even though he's the natural heir. He just wants to be better than Batman as Robin. As good as Dick Grayson can be as Batman, he considers that he will be a better Robin. And this might actually be part of the humiliation he enjoys over Dick, originally.
Is this what you wore in training?
It's what I wore when I went on patrol.
The only thing it's missing is lace trim and a sun hat.
Some parts of Damian's character seem to be directly and deliberately antithetical to Dick Grayson, and you can see that with how they both relate to Alfred. Dick sees Alfred as kindly uncle, second father figure after Bruce, and he calls him Alfie. He's always giving him loving ribbing. And Damian, the complete opposite.
Prepare some tea, Pennyworth.
We are not friends. You're a guy who worked for my father, and now, as far as I'm concerned, you work for me. And then as time goes on, they develop a very interesting sibling rivalry, but there is a compassion and there is a loyalty there.
And we get to see Damian taking lessons while at the same time having a bit of banter, which was fun, and gently Dick Grayson guiding him until you see this little superhero emerging. And by the time Bruce Wayne's back, that's what he's dealing with, so it's easier for him and for Damian to bond at that point, which then makes it worse when it's taken away from them. But what was more interesting for me was to then see Batman taming the kid and to make a point about why Batman doesn't kill.
I was taught you destroy your enemy.
That makes you like them. We don't kill.
He actually tries to reach to Damian in a way he understands. He speaks to him as a sensei and says, you're coming from a place of anger and fear, you're dishonoring yourself and me, stop this. And it showed one of the great things about Batman is that he can adapt.
Batman has fought every crazy villain there is, and nothing is as hard for him as dealing with a child at all, let alone a child who's given him grief.
Damian has a lot to live up to. So in a lot of ways, it's very close to what is explored in mythology and biblically with the father-son dynamic.
Damian honestly tries to please all of his parents, whether it's his grandfather or his mother or Batman. He's conflicted too internally, and that's an interesting story, and it's a great character arc for a young character to go through.
You will not go off on your own for any reason. You will stay away from the Batcave computer. Do you understand?
I owe my grandfather a death.
Well, I think one of the great things about Damian's training is that it got rid of some of the questions of why Batman would work with a kid at all.
I think we might be able to skip the gardener this month.
The kid is trained to such a degree he's almost as good as Batman himself. Here's a boy who's been brought up to be a master assassin.
He has talent.
Getting brainwashed in the womb with fighting techniques. I felt the kid had to be trained, so the fact that he was Talia's son, the fact that he was the grandson of Ra's al Ghul made it possible to believe that a child could be trained to such proficiency and still only be 10 years older.
So Damian kind of represents both the idea of creating an offspring that Ra's can nurture and grow in lieu of actually having Batman involved. And also, he's a way to pull Batman closer to Ra's goal of them uniting. Batman and Ra's are tied together biologically now. Now there's a personal stake in the form of Damian. So in other ways, Damian is the Trojan horse because now he is inside Batman's world in a way that Ra's could never get into.
The kid should be designed for what he was originally designed to be, the ruler of the world. You know, Talia and world's greatest superhero produce the Emperor of Tomorrow, the heir of the Empire of Wayne and Ra's al Ghul combined. That's what he was meant to be, a Napoleon, you know, a world leader, an Alexander. So I took that as the basis.
Talia has to have an iota of hope for her son. At the same time, she is an Al Ghul, and maybe that's just an act. And maybe it is going to be that she's planted a bomb in the Batcave, and its name is Damian. It all remains to be seen, and we're rooting for Damian.
In Batman issue 666, we see the kind of Batman that Damian will turn into if Batman isn't successful in changing him.
This idea of, you know, the Antichrist and the Omen and all these notions that we were throwing about seemed to fit very well in that story, and it came out of that. Just let's do a future Batman story with Damian's Batman, but it's really awful. It's, you know, it's like every 70s devil movie ever taken to its ultimate conclusion.
We see Damian as a full-fledged Batman and what kind of anarchy and destruction he brings to the future because he has not been reformed, that, you know, Batman's training has not changed him or Batman fails in his mission.
You've got this interesting contrast of darker world, hellish reality, but there's still this altruism, there's still this legacy left behind by Bruce Wayne. And Damian, while he might be doing it in ways that Bruce wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with, is trying his best to be the kind of person his father molded.
I don't look at Batman 666 as an Elseworld as much as a possible future I think the readers and viewers always like to see an alternate version of Batman. I also like to see a different design for what Batman could look like in the future, and Damian's outfit definitely looked different. You wanted to see how Damian turned out, and people wanted to know whether or not Batman had succeeded or not.
Damian's death is a conflicting thing for a lot of comic book fans and a lot of Batman fans. You can absolutely see this was kind of his greatest moral victory that he would probably have, in that he's truly separating himself from his mother and defying his mother's villainy, and fights what is another clone of him.
Damian appears in his, his robotic bat suit and quite casually rescues the Commissioner and Nightwing. Then he goes on and he fights the Leviathan kids, and even his suit's torn down, he's prepared to head up the building to save Bruce Wayne. And of course then Nightwing arrives, so the two of them get their little moment together. So he gets to have that, and then finally, defending Nightwing's unconscious body, he's up against his own clone brother, who's using the sword which was wielded by the first ever ancestor of the Waynes. So the entire family thing is laid out there in broken shards of glass.
It's symbolically and literally facing the dark side of your birth and your nature and the things that brought you up, and getting a victory over them.
He does the thing that Ra's would never tell him to do, and by doing that, he becomes one of the most well-known Robins ever. He actually has died valiantly, trying to save the world.
I think that it's easy to attribute the success of Damian as a character to the long story arc. I think that's what did it. People were there for his entire life, basically, and they grew to like him because basically the story dragged them in directions that eventually made us all like him.
Go ahead. Finish me. It's what you want. It's what I would do. It's what your grandfather would do. Do it!
Yes, but I am my father too.
When you compare it to the little kid in the first story who's like throwing plates off the wall and he hates everyone, I think that the gigantic difference between those two characters, yet it's the same person. We've seen how he got from there to there.
I thank you for my life and the life of my son.
Our son.
It's a very strong primal story, and it makes, I think, Damian even a tragic figure, but still a heroic one. He's lived up to the mantle of Robin, and he's fulfilled Batman's goal of making him a good person.
I think it's good that he seems to be dead in it, but obviously I left a huge gaping hole. The grave, the bullet hole, all the different holes in Batman's life. And Damian has to be one of those at the end. I'm sure they'll figure a way to bring him back.
He's just so refreshing a character for the Batman universe. It just hits every note that people deal with every day in their lives. It's not larger than life like everything else in a comic book is. It was time for that.